3 classes, Spanish, history, and English. Held promise and kept my spirit alive. In my first year of junior college, incredibly, led me to the editorship of the college literary magazine, where for the first time I had to make a distinction between good and mediocre writing, and where I saw my own name in print for the first time. Now that was something. Looked good, felt good. There was something there akin to a thrill, writing a line that moved in a rhythm, in a straight line, choosing the right words. Phosphorescence. Now there's a word to lift your hat to, said Emily Dickinson. To find that phosphorescence, that light within, that's the genius behind poetry. But that was about it for then, except for this, the fever. If you're born to write, you better be born to read. Enter writers and libraries and bookstores and readings and recordings and books, books, books. Total immersion. In my time, thank God, I had opportunity to hear Robert Frost, Carl Sandburg, E.E. Cummings, Gwendolyn Brooks, Harry Mark Petrakis, Kenneth Rexroth, Norman Mailer, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and others that I can't recall at this moment. And by the time I graduated from college, prepared to teach English, I was already a closet writer, in love with all kinds of writing, stories in particular, journalism as well, beginning then to make my way through Chicago newspaperdom, while secretly working in the wonder of poetry and into prose. I can't emphasize that enough, poetry into prose, because here in time is where I part ways with the traditional poet and poem and make my own way, rebuilding that house of prose with large windows in every direction to let the light of poetry in, even in the dark. There were 2 writers in particular who taught me how to sing in a straight line rather than a stanza, how to communicate poetry, if you will, in a way that didn't look like poetry on a page, but occupied its place and power in a seemingly prosaic pattern to set off feelings in the mind of the ordinary, everyday reader. One of those writers was a man who died just about the time I was beginning to discover him, hear about him, hear about his exploits in Greenwich Village, New York. Had the occasion some years later to see the very piece of his that he wrote for the stage, to see that performed in Chicago. And I'm speaking of Dylan Thomas, and in particular, well, all of his work really sang, and if you've ever had a chance to hear a recording of his voice, you would know what I mean. But his play for voices called Under Milkwood, which opens like this. To begin at the beginning, it is spring, moonless night in a small town, starless and Bible black, the cobblestones silent and the hunched quarters in Rabbit's Wood, limping invisible down to the slow, black, crow-black fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are blind as moles, though moles are fine tonight into snouting velvet dingles, or blind as Captain Cat there in the muffled middle by the pump, and the town clock, the shops in mourning, the welfare hall in widow's weeds, and all the people of the lulled and dumbfounded town are sleeping now. Hush, the babies are sleeping. the tradesman and pensioner, cobbler, school teacher, postman and publican, the undertaker and the fancy woman, drunkard, dressmaker, preacher, policeman, the web-foot cockle-woman and the tidy wives. Young girls lie bedded soft or glide in their dreams with rings and trousseau, bridesmaided by glowworms down the aisles of the organ-playing wood. The boys are dreaming wicked, or of the bucking ranches of the night and the Jolly Roger to sea, and the anthracite statues of the horses sleep in the fields, and the cows in the bars, and the dogs in the wet-nosed yards, and the cats nap in the slant corners of the loaf sly, streaking and needling on the one cloud of the roofs. You can hear the dew falling and the hushed town breathing. Only your eyes are unclosed to see the black and folded town fast and slow asleep. And you alone can hear the invisible starfall, the darkest before dawn, minutely dew-gray stir of the black dap-filled sea where the Arthurus and the curlew and the skylark, the Zanzibar, the Rananon and the rower, the cormorant and the star of Wales tilt and ride. Listen, it is night moving in the streets, a processional, slow, musical wind in Coronation Street and Cockle Row. It is the grass growing on Lagava Hill, dewfall, starfall, and sleep of birds in Milkwood. I was fortunate learning to write in the city of Chicago, and that there were so many grand masters there as well. And the other one in particular, aside from this Sandberg, who certainly spoke to me, but there was also Nelson Algren, who many people have never even heard of at this point. A wonderful writer. He wrote a book about Chicago for it was Holiday magazine, a travel magazine. He was a tough character, but wrote a beautiful, flowing prose. And when I discovered that article that was turned into a book called Chicago, City on the Make. It's been around. I paid 75 cents for it. It's a first edition, probably worth $150. I was fortunate when I talked about growing up in that city and how important it is to move into reading. They had great bookstores and great book people there. And I remember Paul Romaine, who sold me this book, who told me about it. And I continued going back there until I bought every copy he had, gave away to friends, and now I wish I had them. Here's Algren. Give you a sample of his prose, which to me sang. It's from a chapter in this very small book called Love is for Barflies. Before you earn the right to wrap any sort of joint, you have to love it a little while. You have to belong to Chicago like a crosstown transfer out of the Armitage Avenue barns first. And you can't wrap it then just because you've been crosstown. If you've tried New York for size and put in a stint for Paris, lived long enough in New Orleans to get the feel of the docks and belong to old Marseille a while, if the streets of Naples have warmed you and those of London have chilled you, if you've seen the terrible green-gray African light moving low over the Sahara, or even passed hurriedly through Cincinnati, then Chicago is your boy at last, and you can say it and make it stick. That it's a backstreet black slum loudmouth whose challenge go ringing around the world like any green punks around any neighborhood bar where mellower barflies make the allowances of older men. The punk is just a quacking because his knees is shaking again. What's the percentage? The punk demands like he really has a right to know. Who's to fix in this corner? He combined that toughness of attitude of Chicago, of his writing skill, was a beautiful flowing prose. There's a chapter also that I particularly love in this book called Nobody Knows Where O'Connor Went. And it's it opens this way, speaking again of Chicago. An October sort of city, even in spring, when somebody's washing, always whipping and smoking, October colors off the third floor reared by that same wind that drives the yellowing comic strips down all the gutters that lead away from home. A hoarse-voiced, extra-hawking newsie of a city. By its padlocked pool rooms and its nightshade neon, by its carb-iron Christ-punching transfers all night long, by its nuns studying gin fizz ads in the Inglewood local, you shall know Chicago. By nights when the yellow salamanders of the L bend all the way and the cold rain runs with a red-lit rain. By the way the city's million wires are burdened only by the lightest snow, and the old year yet lighter upon them. When chairs are stacked and glasses are turned and arc lamps are all dim. By days when the wind bangs alley gates ajar and the sun goes by on the wind. By nights when the moon is an only child above the measured thunder of the cars, you may know Chicago's heart at last. You'll know it's the place built out of man's ceaseless failure to overcome himself. Out of man's endless war against himself, we build our successes as well as our failures, making it the city of all cities, most like man himself, loneliest creation of all this very old, poor earth. So those two writers, you read enough of them. I would say too that it was never a conscious attempt to emulate them, but when you begin to read that kind of work, and if in any way it speaks to you, it becomes part of you. It gets in your head, in your system, and eventually works its way, loosening up your own language, and so those echoes are there, and it takes sometimes years for it to have any effect, and sometimes it may not at all, but it did for me.